guys, it's April 21st and crazy day in the markets as per usual. Past performance, not indicative of future returns. And, definitely you're going to have to really watch it in this crazy market that we've got going on these days. So let's take a look at what it is. S&P started up the day really strong, and now all the indices are red. We've got crude oil somehow green. And then we've got pretty much the most oddest situation in the marketplace. Most of the screen was green, and now most of the screen is red with a few positives here and there. Tesla's up because I think it sounds like Elon got his financing. So then Twitter is also doing really well. And you know how we feel about that. I think we've done really, if you're not sure, you should absolutely go check out the little clip that I did on YouTube on Twitter. But Tesla had a great quarter, really, by any stretch of the imagination yesterday. So very well deserved what's going on there. But you know what I think is really fascinating is that vol had actually come in significantly. And I was so shocked at how much, given that we still have so many companies that need to report. But yesterday, you could have gotten that, this went all the way to 20 twice during the day, where I bought some vol on that. And then this index, which is a double version of that, I think went to almost to 19. So, whoops, sorry, this one. Where I went almost to 11 and changed, just under 12. And so you really just want to watch for it because this marketplace is still crazy. But one thing for sure that I'm seeing is that thematic that we talked about, which is some people have their costs under control and some people really do not. And then I think that people are going to have to take some time to interpret what's going on with these earnings reports. Overall, the economy is doing really well. Demand is not your issue yet at this point, and supply, even with some of the oddities that were reported on the rails, I think that's a misinterpretation is my guess. And I'm going to talk to that in a bit. But as per usual, Gurula, we've got this wonderful conference that's happening on May the 15th. If you guys want to check out gurula.net, you can grab the conference information and a deal on the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay. It's going to be amazing. And always come hang out and check out Rich's new room. It's an awesome room. It's 7:30 in the morning. 8:30 in the morning. I guess it depends what time zone you're in. 9:30 if you're in Eastern Standard, but when you're in different time zones, it'll be whatever is right on top of the market open. He'll get you started right for the day. So definitely check him out. Economic data is not what this week is about, guys. It doesn't even matter. We could say whatever we want. It's really about what's going on in the markets as to what the companies are reporting. We did have some leading indicator data, but at this point, I think everybody kind of knows what the thematic is. So I can't see that being what's causing it. Focusing on those themes. Today, we had Tesla last night, really did a great job. And then we had Kinder Morgan, we had Lam Research come out. Oddly enough, Lam Research did a very average job. So I'm out of everything that I was long there. And really their issue wasn't demand. Again, it was supply. And you forget that semiconductors are made with semiconductors. So across the board, demand, that isn't their problem at all. Getting enough into the factories is a real issue. And that was reiterated by the rails. And I really want to go through the rails stuff with you because I think it's really very telling of what's going on in the US, but it's also very confusing this quarter because I could see how someone could misinterpret this. And in fact, I think that's what's happening for the fertilizer companies and in a couple of other places. So if I take what Lam Research said and also what all the other semiconductors have said, and I look at this down 4% on deliveries from the this is CSX, right? And then here it's reiterated as well over here. You had automotive up 6 on UNP deliveries. That's because some of the factories that are, so first I want to show you where the rails go. So Michigan is really CSX, and it's going to bring it down into the other regions. And then you're going to link over to the West Coast rails, which is UNP. And then you've got KSU and Berkshire Hathaway's. Berkshire's comes all the way across the north part of this country. Norfolk Southern, which hasn't reported yet, will go straight down to Mexico. So that's how the rails lay out. So you're getting East Coast thought processes, West Coast thought processes, and where things are being shipped. And then when we get Norfolk and Berkshire Hathaway at the very end, which will report what's going on with BNSF, we'll get to see the rest of the country. But really, these two start you out and you have a pretty good picture after that's all said and done. In autos, we saw autos be fine, shipments up 6%, but it's coming out of this area. There's only one guy that has a shipping area that's in this area. And you know who that is? It's a guy that reported like he was actually able to get cars made. So, realize that. Now you do also have, if you look at where this goes through, you do also have, you don't really, I mean, Chicago, Milwaukee, yeah, but it's not really, that's not really what this side is about. That's what this side is about, right? Michigan on over. So realize that's how it's laying out so far, okay? So very mixed is what I'm gonna say in autos. Pricing probably getting it through. Both rail companies got massive pricing through, fuel surcharges through. That part isn't the issue. So that's what's going on in the automotives. In the chemicals, we had Dow Chemical come out crazy good. And that's despite the fact that they have crazy amounts of increase in raw material costs. They have a bit of ethanol exposure. Really, DuPont took the majority of that piece of the business. Dow is really the silica business. So they're taking pressure from silica just being something that other things also need. You know what I mean? Silica is in actually semiconductors and everything, right? And so still going through exactly where, but essentially for Dow, their revenue was great in everything. Packaging, specialty plastics, this is the stuff that goes on in, industrials and infrastructure, performance materials and coating. By the way, performance materials and coating is that there's like a film that goes on top of semiconductors that keeps everything not blowing up on you essentially. And that's what this is. And you look at the sales volumes are crazy, up 20. So you want to look at the volumes, up 4, up 1, up 8, up 11 on the quarter. Those are very big increases given that you have supply chain issues, given that you've got all this other stuff going on. And then obviously they're just pushing price right on through. So their sales numbers are great. I almost feel bad because I was a little bit worried that they wouldn't be able to get the pricing mix up a certain way. So I actually was no longer in this, but for those of you that just stayed the course and were like, screw it, it probably isn't going to go down. You're right, I was wrong. I'm going to give it to you. This was one of the ones that I put on everybody's radar screen back in December, and it's rallying aggressively. From here, I probably would just keep holding because I think this was the quarter where you would have had issues. On the go forward, there's a lot of potentiality that's actually more in the positive. So again, let's keep going on this. We saw great chemicals numbers there. I want to talk about coal because I know everybody's got coal positions, and then I want to talk about fertilizer. Both are a little bit misinterpreted. So coal crushed it, but it didn't do it on volume, it did it on pricing. So I think some people freaked out. I want you guys to remember that coal has to be mined out of the ground. Okay, so pricing, if basically the railway companies were able to get pricing, it also implies that the coal companies were able to get pricing. And we talked about that both with the ags, which was up. Fertilizer is embedded in here. It's down 2, right? This just means fertilizer didn't ship on the rails, even though the revenue, and they just didn't ship it. But I want to remind you that a huge component of East Coast fertilizer is made in Florida, where you can ship it overseas if you needed to, which is what I think actually happened. Okay, so I'm not ready to like give up on Mosaic because of this down 2. If anything, I'm gonna let it go through closer to earnings. And if people get really stupid and silly, I'm gonna try to find a way to get back into it in a different way. I'd been hedging it pretty aggressively because the run up was so dramatic. That said, down 10 today is a little bit crazy. So just realize that because the fertilizer is located in Florida, where you don't have to ship it anywhere to ship it overseas. I mean, it's literally in the center of Florida. You just need to get it onto a truck to go to Tampa Bay to ship out the Gulf of Mexico, all right? Or you can do the other coast because it's literally right in the center of the state, okay? So just realize that that's actually where it's made and shipped. This one's a hard one because it could potentially be that that's what's happening. The other place that you make a lot of fertilizer, because remember, phosphate in particular, which is the area where both companies were like, look, nitrogen, okay, also probably going to be shipped across, because also it turns out that because nitrogen is made as a kind of, one of the big components is the urea, which is basically made from a NAS gas byproduct in a lot of cases. Because it's all made down here, it's possible that what's happening is that, very possible, not kind of possible, given what we're seeing globally, right? It's very possible that the reason fertilizers is down, it's up 2% for UNP. I think people were probably anticipating stronger, but it's possible that the problem is it's not coming into the United States. The demand overseas is so aggressive. So just realize that. I think that because they report next week, you have a couple of days here to watch it. And if the powers that be decide they want to short the hell out of these stocks, the dynamics haven't changed. And that kind of is what it is. And there's not a farmer in all of North America that's not telling you that his fertilizer cost is a little bit ridiculous this year. So realize that. Again, I would also mention that of the two, nitrogen versus phosphate, phosphate's easier to track what's going on. It's not that nitrogen is wrong or bad or probably not going to do fantastic. It probably will. But I think the way that UNP spun it was decrease our declines in long haul fertilizer shipments were only partially offset by increased short haul phosphate shipments, right? So phosphate was not the piece of this fertilizer mix that did poorly. It would either be manure, which in fairness, Mosaic does, or alternatively, it would be nitrogen. So those are your things to note there. And then let's talk about coal, because I know you guys care. And again, I just want to remind people there are two types of coal: metallurgical coal, which is used in steel making. That's going to come out of the southern Appalachia region. And then you've got thermal coal. Interestingly, a lot of folks said that there was a shortage, that there was a little bit of a shortfall on the volume of thermal coal, which is very surprising to me. But you can see it in the coal increase and higher export benchmark price that offset lower shipments of domestic coal and international thermal coal. Now, the way that I think you think about that is the domestic coal is both thermal and metallurgical. So you had slightly lower shipments of it. And then on the international front, it may be that we actually reserve that coal here domestically for ourselves. So that's what is always a little bit hard to tell on these. The coal pricing on this side was crazy, up 30%. And they didn't say one way or the other if there was an issue with coal, but they did say that in general, they expected the back half of the year for coal to be quite strong. So my suspicion is what's happening is here on the East Coast, you do have, especially down in the metallurgical piece, you have some labor onboarding things that are still happening as the unions kind of work themselves out. Most of that is now worked out, but whether or not it actually led to adequately increased production to ship out is a real thing, okay? So my suspicion is more here on the thermal front. This could be any number of things because we did absolutely use coal more so than usual in the country during the winter months. Of course, this would end March. So it may be that we're just restocking domestically instead of sending it international. The one thing I will say is that the coal price is the coal price and it's up. So that kind of is what it is on coal. And I find it really fascinating, but people are going to do whatever they do, and that is what it is. This is how opportunities are created. So you just have to kind of look for them, hedge out where you can. So I would mention that. Some other things, American Airlines and United Airlines, it's interesting because the numbers are kind of shit, but everyone doesn't care. Most people just care whether or not travel's in recovery. Domestic is still at like 20% of 2019. And it's interesting because when you look at it cosmetically, it looks like 100% up until you realize that it's still trailing 2019. Now they talk so positively on this call that you'd have to be following this like a hawk to realize that that's what's going on. On the same time, costs went up, were double essentially. So essentially they ended up with like slightly down on the year over year. So even though they doubled the amount of passengers, they made less money off the passengers because of all the costs. Same thing with United, except United didn't lose money at a higher rate than they did than American. They actually were flat. So they doubled the amount of passengers and made the exact same loss as the previous year. American Airlines doubled the amount of passengers and lost more money. I'm not sure that that's the right way to run a business, but everybody is basically banking on international, and we are seeing Latin America improve dramatically. They are suggesting that they're seeing flights to the Mid-Atlantic. United is saying that they're starting to see the first glimmers of flights to Asia, but all of them are saying that when people do fly, they pay. So I think that that's where people are going toward. But it's really amazing how short the memories are within airlines, where you're like, oh yeah, they're going to recover by this year, they're going to recover by this year. The stocks have been more or less flat, which is amazing given how much they've pushed out that recovery stuff. So realize that, but the market wants to bid them up. So that is what it is. And if anything, I still think the better way to play this is through Booking and Expedia. Both of them underwent significant improvements in the business where they actually legitimately have operating margin improvements. So I would rather, if you're day trading these, you'll have a lot of fun, because right now that's really what we're talking about within these companies. Within other parts of travel, I think that the recovery is a little bit easier to play. My favorite place, again, is those two companies, Booking and Expedia. I'd rather see people go there if they're not day traders. If you are day traders, though, you got me. Okay. This was the other interesting thing I saw. This is, let's stay in basic materials. We'll come back to this. Freeport-McMoRan traded down as well. And it's very interesting. The way it's being spun is they crushed the quarter, which is true. I think they had like a 30% increase top line, something like this, just under. And then they had like 100% increase on the bottom line. And unlike other companies where it was like flipping from a negative to positive, Freeport's been doing well the entire time. People are saying that the reason they traded down is because they guided downwards in some way. Okay, maybe kind of, right? Their issue is they're worried about the gas input cost that goes into mining, which is a real thing, okay? Because whereas they are the low-cost producer of a lot of this stuff because they're in Indonesia, which subsidizes and supplement, is an oil-producing nation, stuff like that, they're still worried about it because it's gotten out of control, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? So just realize that for them, for every 25-cent move upwards in copper, they make $1 billion in cash flow increase. EBITDA increases by $1 billion. Okay. So now I know people are concerned about global demand, but then at the same time, we got this massive 5G infrastructure build still to come. And copper, guess what, goes in everything electronic. Huge component that's been actually holding things back is the semiconductor space. If that actually starts to go in the forward direction correctly, demand should be out of control for copper. And all you need, every 25 cents for copper is $1 billion to Freeport. So just realize that. Yes, here's the diesel cost. It's a little bit less sensitive, but yeah, 10% increase, which is like $10, okay? Like 10% increase will actually detract a bit. So 425 million is if you look at this chart, which if you're one of my paid subscribers will be in the Discord, 110 on the delta for diesel. And this is how they model out what happens as relates to copper. The sensitivity to other areas, other things that they have is not quite as sensitive. It's really, I think copper really has the greatest sensitivity. Additionally, as you know, Freeport-McMoRan mines gold. So if we just see more indecision and confusion in people using gold as a store of value, then obviously Freeport is one of the net beneficiaries of that in a big way. Newmont would be the other. Nucor, I don't have here. They reported a great quarter. That actually is really beneficial to folks that have metallurgical coal. So thus far, I've been a little bit nervous about being bullish metallurgical coal because I didn't know what was going on in the steel market relative to input costs and whether they would bear it. But apparently the steel market's been doing just fine. Volumes are just fine. I still have to listen to their call, which will be later tonight, but it looks like actually you're fine on either type of coal for right this moment in history and time. So, if you've got Oyer, which is the one that you always have, HCC, Richard, you probably should be fine on that one. They're probably going to have a fantastic quarter as well. And let's see, the last thing that I would mention, okay, Kinder Morgan, just in follow-up, this really bummed me out. I still think they double from here over the course of a few years. And they really had a lot of insight into the fact that they're not having any problems. Any capacity they can put on in the way of storage or piping is being swallowed up. The challenge is a lot of their older contracts are done at $57 oil that's still coming through. So they have to let all of those contracts kind of stop doing that thing. Now, some of those contracts are actually on the refining portion of their business. So thank God, right? Like, basically they're taking in $60 oil and they're refining it and reselling it at these crazy prices. So good for them. But on the other side of it, there is that component where some of the fuel surcharge isn't totally baked in a certain way because the contracts are a little bit longer in tooth. That said, they make money at that price. So it's really a function of over time having increasing cash flow. They're paying back a ton of debt. So they were probably, the whole story with these guys is they either use cash and give it back to you as a dividend, or they use it to pay down debt, or alternatively, they build into their storage facility because of what's going on right now, because of how people are doing their deal on, like, now everybody's kind of wanting a little bit of extra oil and nat gas. They're seeing plenty of demand if they build new storage facilities. Now, these two will report later, so we'll see how that goes. But in general, this is still a way to get very boring exposure to oil and gas, have your nice little happy dividend yield, which is going to be better than what the bank is giving you, and you just chill. There's really not another way to say it. You just chill, because nothing bad is going to happen with these three at this point in history. Final thing that is probably pretty relevant was Philip Morris, of all people. They actually did very average on the quarter, and they spun it as best they could. But the fact is, they would have actually been up 11% on sales, except they had a 23-cent currency impact. And this is something that a lot of the companies that are consumer that have exposure overseas, most of them have not started to talk yet about what is the impact of currency. Now, that said, in luxury spaces and otherwise, obviously, some luxury items are going to have struggles because of how much certain types of countries purchase their products. But at the same time, this currency impact, I think we're going to have to look for it through companies like Coca-Cola, through other companies out there. But it was 23 cents, which actually was enough to take them into like a kind of down EPS number, quite frankly, or flat. They did all these machinations, but in fairness, it should be reported diluted EPS, but they came up with an adjusted, and they came up with a pro forma, which is not what they usually do, by the way. So just realize that is a thing that we will see. Now, I think this quarter, not so much. The currencies are all kind of trading very wild, so there's every opportunity to hedge. But as we go further out, it's just going to be something people are going to have to take note of. And with that, I will hit the stop share. And are there questions? How's it going, guys?
Hey, May.
Hey.
I just want to, fertilizer is not an option. It's a necessity, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not going to buy it this year because the price is too high.
Yeah, I mean, the US may buy slightly less, so they'll figure out different ways to do it, but overseas countries are going to need it. So like one of the things too is that like really the people that would buy it from us would be Latin America, because there is some cost to shipping that is not insignificant with fuel prices high. That's kind of a thing. The farmers in the Midwest are all over the map. Some of them are trying to find alternatives, but like the thing is, whenever volumes go down, if they get their pricing, then all they did was just actually finally get some inventory built, which is what they need anyway. So it's not, I mean, like, if these companies were very expensive, I would be worried, but these companies still trade at like single digits on earnings, EBITDA, however you want to think about it. Remember that nitrogen is a little bit more exposed to nat gas than the phosphate area is, so to speak. So it makes sense to me that phosphate is doing significantly better, or is showing that there's still good shipments going through relative to nitrogen. Nitrogen people tend to want, like if you look at the fertilizer composite mix, you'll see that nitrogen, the amount of nitrogen additives that you need is much higher than the amount of phosphate. So if nitrogen suddenly falls out of demand, it's a bigger kind of like chunk, for lack of a better way to describe it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And there's another thing that sometimes people forget. The US in the center of the state actually has a little bit more nitrogen in the soil than overseas, like Brazil. That soil is less nitrogen rich. Our soil is ever so slightly more nitrogen rich, but it's on the margins. We still apply plenty of nitrogen to our crops. So I don't want that to be confused. But what our soil doesn't have is phosphate, and that food production, that's So we take our NPK mix as a slightly higher amount of phosphate than even other countries. But in fairness, other countries also need that definitely for crop density, which I know, everybody kind of needs right now because we are going to have some issues if we don't have a nice, beautiful harvest this summer.
Right. So I guess the Ukraine conflict helped the prices, but do you see, I mean, if that's over with, do you see the prices coming down?
Well, you actually really need it to, so you need a couple, it's kind of like, remember when we had that Professor Dan come on and talk about the whole complex. This is a 2-year situation at best to resolve the shortages that we already had even before Ukraine, Russia, and now the shortage that necessarily is going to happen because, I mean, we're still in the middle of it. Unless you believe that somehow there's some really aggressive farmers out there farming in the middle of missiles being fired, this is not a one and done situation. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's going to have to be compensated for. India's been having issues all along with, they've got kind of, occasionally they'll have a good crop. That wasn't the case last year, but then also because of a couple of different things that are going on geographically, I don't know how you exactly describe it. They've had a shrinking amount of arable land throughout the last decade, for lack of a better way to describe it. So they've been needing to use fertilizer fairly intensely to try to, manage their food supply and manage the ability to export food. Brazil, as we know, has been cutting down rainforests left and right to grow food for other countries. These things just don't change. And Brazil absolutely uses fertilizers quite a bit, which I think is probably where our shipments are going.
Melvin, sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
what you got, Dietrich?
Dietrich, go ahead.
No, you mentioned Brazil. So is Brazil like the source for all of us to receive all that, or what?
It's a good question. Brazil is increasingly becoming relevant both for all natural resources, but also for food. And the country that actually really likes importing in, for whatever reason, it's so far away, is actually China. So China will, and it's kind of a bizarre thing. Definitely other things like if you look at your packaging for your fruits and vegetables, you'll see that lots of it comes from Latin America. A lot of our fruits come from the mountain region in northern Chile and then southern Peru and all that stuff. Ecuador ships us like half our flowers come from Ecuador. There's crazy amounts of stuff. Brazil is kind of, I would say we definitely ship in a lot of food products from Brazil, increasingly so. And then of course, as we go farther from Brazil, Argentina, that area, that's a lot of live cattle and stuff like that we ship in as well. So it's a whole mix of stuff. They've definitely continued to grow that agricultural business. And then the other thing that's really bizarre, that's just, this is like longer term crazy stuff that's been going on the earth, is like China, because it would prefer to ship out of the West Coast, sorry. It would prefer to ship out of the West, just given where it's geographically located. There was this project where they were trying to literally build a road from the West to Brazil so that they could, do a series of things that was very upsetting to environmentalists, but essentially had to do with creating another source of food supply for China.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It'll probably take them years and decades to get it all built, but nonetheless, it is happening. And it is something that Brazil is, they've got an election coming up. My understanding is that the new election regime may be more environmentally sound, so they might calm it down for a couple of years. Nonetheless, the existing farmers are probably going to want to take advantage of these elevated agricultural prices, and that means they will most likely use fertilizer where it makes sense economically.
Thank you. Also, is it possible for like all the different countries to become more independent, possibly, or is that an issue because of the climate, or depending on their climate?
It's a great question. It depends, right? So the biggest thing is, so some countries, like we just, Our issue is labor cost. Okay, if we're really, you know what I mean, like that's pretty straightforward. It's really labor cost. Some of it's distribution as well, you know what I mean, but most of it really at this point is labor cost. For Latin America, they're net exporters for the most part, so they're not really to blame. Europe's going to have issues. Europe was really dependent on Central and Eastern Europe to help them out. So obviously that's not great right now. You know, and then different countries also have different rules, you know, so a lot of areas are like organic only in Europe and all that such. It'll take time. It'll take a lot of time.
I'm still shocked though, because of all the latest technology, you would think that would help out with the labor issue. But I guess that costs more money as well to make it run as well. So yeah.
Okay, so so yes, the amount of labor that you need for the same amount of output has decreased dramatically, and especially like the big farmers that aren't necessarily making organic, but even some of the ones that are organic farming that have actually have absolutely implemented. John Deere has done really well in certain ways. They have a few potential supply chain issues, but we'll find out if those resolve themselves in this next quarter. They're a little bit later on when they report. So farming technology has been a really big deal. But you know, and you nailed it right on the head with energy costs. So that's something that a lot of the farmers talk about, is that they still have to have energy to run everything essentially. And so, yeah, it's an awkward situation the farmers are in. I hope that it all nets out where they make money this year, because it's not a fun business. It is a fun business. It's a labor of love, I guess, is how they must think of it. But yeah.
Yeah, I kind of need to do some more research on it. My goal is to really learn a lot about the solar energy as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, really cool.
But then, of course, everything affects each other. So, but
yeah. No, you're totally right. Energy and food, they like strangely enough go hand in hand in ways that are really, really interesting. I'll try to post even more on the Discord to help with your research as well. We've got a bunch of stuff, as you know, in there that I separated out for food.
Yeah, your Discord is great.
I'll put a bunch more in there though, since I know you're kind of trying to do some maybe the earlier tutorials as well too, that could be helpful. Cool. Very awesome. Other questions?
I just want to mention, You've heard of Melvin Capital, right?
I think so, but I'm not. It's not on
19 billion. They went out of business. So.
So that's what's really happening here. Is it's just the unwind of all that.
Well, like look at Facebook. There's no news, and it's down to 190, and that was one of their big holdings.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think yesterday we even talked about, before we started the recording, that it felt like it was. It felt like there was a weird unwind. Do you know what I mean? Because the positions were kind of related, like thematically to each other. It almost felt like, oh, you know, these three, which you'd only be long these three if it was this, when the market was all green. It's like this really looks like someone's just blown out of a position. That makes sense. What happened exactly at Melvin? Did it say?
Short GameStop.
Oh, so it was a true unwind. That's when like so do you, I don't know. You used to work on the floor, so you might know this. It's actually very funny. You know what it looks like when the SEC comes and unwinds your book? This is apparently, I'll tell you, even if you know, because I know you're a floor trader, but some of my friends told me, because like during 2008, this actually happened. They literally go in there and they tell the traders, they like almost more or less tap the traders on the back, and they're like, thank you very much. Please stay for the day as we unwind your book. And then you have to sit there and watch a guy unwind your book. They're like, it's disturbing and upsetting. So you don't even get to do it. It's just like very systematic removal of your positions.
Yeah, you're out of control.
So I have a question, man.
You don't have control anymore.
Oh, sorry, David.
No, go ahead.
So what's happening with Devon today? I mean, I've got it falling to support, but it's really, I guess everything is just sort of.
Yeah, there's nothing that there's like, I think right now, if we're seeing some unwinds, if we're seeing some hedge funds that truly did stupid, for lack of a better way to describe it, then that's probably going to drive things more than anything. Like Google reporting next week shouldn't be down 1%, you know, doesn't even make sense. They're going to report fine. I mean, unless somebody knows something very strange. Wow, Amazon down 2.5. Yeah, this looks like an unwind, but there's nothing in the way, like commodity prices are still really high. Every single person that would be hedging out there. So like the trains absolutely hedge out whatever they can. And they're like, not looking great for the back half of the year. So there's no change to LNG. Nothing has changed. I think what you do is just be very cautious. And if things get really crazy, you specifically, because I know you don't usually swing trade, might find it interesting to swing trade. Remember that these guys report that first week of May. And so that's going to be very telling of whatever it is. What was interesting to me is that you do see volatility increasing as well. I have some positions that are short, but I'm shorted as a credit. And even though that in theory is making money because the price is going in the direction I'd like it to go, my spread is not making money because vol increased.
Yeah.
So there's some of that going on, which makes a lot of sense that Melvin Capital or maybe companies that are probably also a little bit worried about where they're holding their positions, that will absolutely happen when stuff like that goes down.
Yeah, I've decided to buy time. Normally I would buy this as an intraday trade on Devon, but I bought the May calls, which is for me a long time, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, just getting behind the earnings, right? Is that how you're thinking about it?
20. So I'm going to just keep adding to those. I don't normally average down. I'm going to do that because I do believe that. I mean, this gas and oil. I mean, you can't.
It's got a bias. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, but the market is really struggling today.
Yeah. I think if people know, usually if there's been an announcement that someone's unwinding, then it's just blood. People are like, I wonder what they've got. Let me just make the price lower and just force them into it. So you can see a lot of really bizarre behavior. They must not have Apple since Apple's up 1%. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, Google it. It'll tell you what they have.
What's that? Oh yeah, no, right. You can just, good point. Excellent point. Yeah. I think on days like it really pays to just kind of, it's hard. It's a hard business as a day trader, but it can be incredibly lucrative because of the volatility. And then as an investor, just double down on the work that you want, because I think this quarter may be one of the major quarters where you can get opportunities in certain types of things that you really want. And I don't think that the entire market is a flat out buy, but I have been very impressed with how some companies have reported. What I'm mainly seeing is companies being fine on revenue, but either like really messing it up on their operating margins. And even though I would say like on my little spreadsheet that I keep, which I'll try to publish on Friday, because I'll probably have closer to 80, 70 companies already listened to, then I am not necessarily seeing all of them come in great. So if there are reports that are suggesting everybody's doing amazing, that I think is suspicious. And part of the reason it may be suspicious is because my hypothesis is that they're thinking the words first quarter, and that's how they're scraping through the data. But first quarter for some companies ended Jan 31, February. So that first quarter that they're using would not incorporate the Ukraine, the Ukraine-Russia conflict and the subsequent things, and it wouldn't incorporate China's round of COVID. So the picture that someone might have, if that's how they're doing your research, is going to be very different from the picture that I'm seeing. Additionally, what I noticed that a lot of people did was they took down their estimates on some things more than I would have anticipated. And so it looks like, oh my God, they beat the quarter. But when you look at what actually came out, you're like, ooh, that ain't great. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think, I'm not a fan of how reactive certain ways, but then there's others that really crushed it, like fair and square. That Dow, unbelievable quarter, top line growth, expanding operating margins, big thumbs up. Who else did it? Freeport, which is getting clobbered because of future guidance in theory, but in practice, I didn't really hear them come out at all, one way or the other, also getting clobbered. I think next week your coal companies come out. I'm really excited to see what they have to say. Because I don't
Freeport right here, and I see there's a key support level that it is about to hit today at 44.11. So
Yeah.
that
I
point,
originally was going to try to find a way in at 34. And at first, when they first came out of the thing, I'm a little bit nervous on earnings day to do it, even though that would be where you'd get the most volatility out of it if you were trying to structure it as a credit versus as a debit. Freeport always trades so weird on earnings. There's not been a quarter where I haven't wanted to tear my hair out a little bit on Freeport. So I don't know, I might do something really, really small on Freeport and then like.
these support levels and resistance, I mean, it really does. So
Yeah.
I think
If
that,
it breaks through that, then that's a problem. But if it seems to hold it, then you'd be intrigued. Is that how you're thinking about it?
or if it breaks through that to the downside, then it's going to 41.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't see that. I mean, I just don't, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll wait, pick it up tomorrow on the call.
I'm more likely tomorrow just to see how things trade and to see if this market keeps melting or what it's going to do. If anything, I definitely have my eyeballs on all of the coal stocks because I could see how someone might look at the rails report, which I'm not the only one that does that. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm some kind of special, I'm not, right? I can see how someone looks through the rails report and didn't listen to the call where they said it very clearly, or just didn't read carefully enough and thinks that coal somehow, or not coal, but fertilizer, both fertilizer and coal. I could see how they just misunderstand, right? And so if those things are reporting next week, if they get pushed too aggressively, you know, I mean, these things trade at low single digits in some cases, you know what I mean, on earnings that are going to continue to be great. The fact is Europe doesn't have energy. I don't know another way to say it. You know what I mean? I don't know if this is like some gigantic Texas Hold'em game where people are just pretending to have cards they don't have, but let's just call it what it is.
Right.
Europe doesn't have fuel, okay? They don't. I don't know how they're going to get it. I don't know what they're going to do because they can't just have no fuel and just let their economy go to, I mean, maybe they can, I don't know. But, you know, they run, their governments are run more expensively than ours are. Do you know what I mean? And ours is not the cheapest government to run. So like, you know, you think about all the social services that are offered in Europe that aren't even offered here. Do you know? Like, I have no idea how they get through I don't know, you know?
Yeah. Well, Devon just keeps melting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually, it has exceeded its ATR. So I don't understand how it can continue to fall anymore, but it's about to find support at a key level of 61.30. That's where the 20-day EMA is, and it could bounce from there. But I'm going to be adding to this position for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, like, the only thing with that is that if it just resets itself to like the sub 60 level, do you know what I mean? And you can, I mean, yeah.
I think it's an overreaction.
It is totally, you know, yeah. I mean,
let me throw this in. Powell is speaking.
Yeah.
He said inflation peaked in March. So there you go.
yeah. So what are they, you think that they think energy is going to like decline?
Well, they would, yeah, they say inflation in general. So, I mean, that would cover everything.
Oh, okay. So you think that the people are just like, oh, fuel prices are going down from here.
That's, yeah, it's an overreaction. I was just responding to Rich.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't realize that he said that. Thank you. Interesting.
Well, I sold out of my puts this morning like a dummy, and I should have stayed in them long. I did have SPY puts. I sold those way too early and got into SPY calls, but I'm comfortable with the SPY calls. I believe the SPY has probably bottomed for the day, so I'm expecting it to make a move back to the upside today. The SPY, is Powell finished speaking now, or is he still talking?
It was more of a conference with like, yeah, he wasn't speaking to the media. He was speaking, it was more of a group. It was on CNBC.
All right. Okay. So if they're not reporting about him anymore, then that tells me the market will find its footing. Okay. So I'm looking for green the rest of the day.
Okay. I'm with you.
Any other questions? Let you guys get back to trading. All right, guys. Good luck out there. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, May.
Hey, mate.